Welcome back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back at you with another talk. Yet again, we've got Matt. How you doing, Matt? Welcome back.
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me back.
It's excellent. People loved your last appearance. It was one of the most viewed videos on the channel. One of my favorites comments was you delivering a masterclass in Canadian politeness.
All right, cool. Well, we'll see if we can replicate that in some way.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. It was definitely I can't remember all the topics that we talked about, but you were definitely polite about most of them. In any case, in passing, last time we talked, I mentioned the Bilderberg group, and you were surprised to hear that they have a website. And now, a couple of weeks later, a month and so later, they're having their annual meeting. And it's happening in Portugal.
Yes, it is.
What do you think the people need to know about the Bilderberg meetings? I mean, I've been following this for like 10, 15 years or so, Bilderberg as an organization or as an institution, whatever you want to call them. But what would be like the main thing that you want to point out to people, like right off the bat, before we get into some of the history of the Bilderberg group?
Well, I guess it's a topic which I've seen treated a lot. Obviously, anybody who is trying to make sense of the world, try to get their mind around this idea of multi-generational agendas, which are trying to move, nudge, and corral the human species into a certain preordained direction, can't avoid being slapped by the existence of this grouping that meets annually and has met annually since 1954 when its inaugural summit was set up. Usually, about 130 or so participants are invited representing different branches of corporate public sectors who are generally to varying degrees in on the game, in on the actual agenda. So you can't avoid slapping into this thing. It's very secretive, which also causes the mind to wonder what the hell is really being said. There's a lot of inference that one has to make. That's just a Wikipedia entry you're scrolling up and down on just to see some of, I guess, showcasing some of the participants over the years of the steering committee.
Yeah, I did some clicking through the internet before we started recording, and one of the strange things to come up was a Britannica entry. I was like, what? Britannica has an entry on the Bilderberg. That was interesting for me. But yeah, I'm just scrolling through some things here in the background for people to just have an idea. Maybe they can pause if they're interested and read through some of the other stuff that's on here, let's say. But the point is that here we've got the usual Wikipedia blah blah blah, and then right at the end they've got the conspiracy theories aspect of it, because it's all conspiracy theories, right?
Yeah, so I've noticed that most of the treatments of those researchers who try to make sense of this handle it, in my view, pretty incompetently. They tend to just focus on this particular club, this meeting group, as if it is the only thing that is at the heart of all of our problems. And it is very close to the nerve center, undoubtedly the case. That is true. But they ignore, there's a lack of rigor, let's just say, that I hope we can clarify a little bit in the course of our dialogue today. And the fact that this thing is happening in Portugal, in Lisbon at this moment, or just finished happening, is a point of irony, since, one of the key banks, Banco Espírito de Silva, is the Portuguese member bank of what is known as the Inter-Alpha Group. The Inter-Alpha Bank Group was also set up in 1971 as part of a junior project of the Bilderberger Group. So the same month, in January of 1971, you had two organizations created to manage the next phase of reconquest of the former democratic states of the West, of the transatlantic zone. And I say democratic in the loosest of terms. There has been revolutionary struggles to break free of oligarchical class systems over the centuries in the West. Never has this, especially in the case of the United States, never has this been consummated properly. There's been moments where things were getting better, where you had legitimate moral resistance in political leadership positions. Oftentimes, those would be presidents who would die while in office. But, there has been a fight over the past 250 years. Same thing for Europe. And a big part after World War II, I mean, here's the thing. You and I talked about this a little bit on our last show. World War II is not what most people were told it is. World War II
Hmm.
was a very important battle, an attempt to create a one world government, a fascist corporatist world order under Mussolini corporatism.
Hmm.
People have probably researched a little bit of the London U.S. banks, industrialists who were behind the growth before, during World War II of the Nazi war machine, including Standard Oil, the Rockefeller machine, the DuPonts, the Morgans, the Montague Normans of the Bank of England. So, I mean, these were all operations that were never punished after World War II. And so one could say it was not necessarily a war that was won, but rather a battle that was won, thank God, that bought humanity some time. But those who made the damn thing happen never gave up on their agenda. They just simply lived to fight another day and reorganized. So the Bilderberg group, when you look at Prince Bernhard, the founder of this thing, when it was first set up in 1954, he himself was a former high-level Nazi officer, part of a leading inner blood, an inner family tied to a lot of other inbred families of Europe.
Did a
Kind of the
Russian
house.
tell you this?
Yeah. That's part of the. I mean, this is even Wikipedia. This is like not even like scandalous conspiracy material. This is openly acknowledged that these royal families are inbred. The deceased queen and her deceased husband
Hmm.
were themselves both progeny, both cousins, born of the same grandmother, Queen Victoria. It's a nasty little inbred network, and so Prince Bernhard was one player who was assigned a certain role. And as I just mentioned, 1971 is a key year when you had the Inter Alpha Group created, a conglomerate of private, major, generally Rothschild-affiliated banks of Europe that was under the helm of what became the Royal Bank of Scotland, the Jacob Rothschild Bank there, overseeing the Crown, the British Crown's assets and money, along with another bank called Bank Coutts, which is only informally a member. The idea was every major nation within Europe that would be increasingly recaptured, and there was already a 25-year-long, by this time, operation to strip the nations of Europe of any claims of sovereignty, which had been going on really the moment World War II was finished, and the leading Nazis were reincorporated back into U.S. intelligence and British intelligence. People like Stefan Bandera, Nicola Lebed, Reinhard Gehlen, the leading Nazis and Italian fascists that were brought into Operation Gladio, NATO's secret armies. These were all put to work in the war against communism in the Cold War. So
Remind me if I'm mistaken, but or correct me if I'm mistaken, but wasn't the European Union and the European Commission or whatever it's called their project, the Bilderberg Group, originally?
Well, the European Union, as it is known today, came out of a program that was launched. There were several key founders of the European, I guess you could call them founding fathers of the European Union. One of the key figures was a fellow named Robert Schuman, the foreign minister of France, who put forth the Schuman Plan. It was endorsed heavily, actually co-written by George Ball, the guy who becomes a Bilderberger Group steering committee member, and a big advocate of the idea of the World Corporation. He was a Undersecretary of State under JFK. Definitely oversaw JFK's murder, and the murder also of the South Vietnamese president in 1963. And he went on to become the UN ambassador to the U.S. ambassador to the UN. And so the Schuman Plan was what originally was designed to start creating sort of a central authority taking control of the coal and oil production systems of Germany and France. And that became basically it manifested in 1951 with the what was it called, the European Coal and Steel Community, and then that branched open more and more to become the European Economic Community in 1957 as a direct outgrowth of the Schuman Plan, and the Eurobond Euro dollar market as well grew out of that throughout the 1960s, just increasingly stripping away and preparing the groundwork for the replacement of the sovereignty of nations by a supranational structure that would be very much enmeshed with the private banking and oil, resource controlling complexes under this new sort of British East India Company modeled octopus, which would be that's corporatism. I mean, that's essentially Mussolini corporatism. The idea that the government would become an appendage of corporate private financial power instead of the private financial power being a tool of the people through the instrument of government, which was, I think, a much healthier way of organizing society, which was illegal, which was the target of destruction by those who created the Bilderberg group. They wanted nations to just be one branch of corporate fascist power in order to manage, not really even make money, but rather manage resources and manage the people that are dependent upon those resources. And I also here include intellectual resources, the permitted thoughts and ideas within school systems, within acceptable science, So that would be sort of the ideas: is maximum control, and also the for a small grouping of self-proclaimed gods, and the maximum illusion of control or the illusion of freedom for as many as possible that you don't, that basically you'll allow to live as a slave class. So all that to say, there were two organizations in 1971, and 71 is a very big year. So you had the World Economic Forum under a Kissinger prodigy, Kissinger being also a leading co-chair at different times, steering committee member of the Bilderberg group. He's there even this year in Portugal. So that was one of his prodigies. Klaus Schwab was installed as the front man to create sort of a junior Bilderberger organizing committee that would also meet once or twice a year. And 1971, that same month, you had the Inter-Alpha group with their core branches of key bank members in each major European country that would then grow in membership to, I think today it has 13 members. It started with 6. And I brought up my irony, Portugal being today's meeting of the Bilderberger group. Portugal was also the Portuguese Banco Espírito Silva was founded by a guy named Ricardo Espírito Santo Silva, who was the host of the Nazi king, Edward the Eighth, when he was kicked out of Britain for being too pro-Hitler at a time when when the British elite were beginning to realize that their Hitler Frankenstein monster was a little bit too unwieldy and difficult to control. They had to change plans, and part of those plans involved the flushing of the Nazi king, who was given sanctuary and hosted in Portugal throughout much of the World War II by the pro-fascist banking elite there. And so the leading member of that group in the Inter-Alpha group is Portuguese. So I thought that was just an interesting irony. It was also enmeshed in financially supporting the growth of Franco, the Spanish fascist regime, which was supposed to be part of a global complex of fascist regimes that would enforce a policy of population reduction on behalf of a banker's dictatorship from above. That was the original plan. That didn't really work out. But like I said, you got to look at these participants. So all that to say, it's not, the Bilderberger group isn't an outgrowth of the European community as such, but the European community is the outgrowth of what becomes the Bilderberger group that even existed before the Bilderberger group,
Yeah, I've been meaning to cut you off a bit, but I wanted to let you finish. I'm sure the comments are gonna go crazy. Either way, whatever I do. Your fancy camera's autofocus seems to have gone off a bit, and you're all blurry.
I'll stop the video and restart the video.
All right, maybe that'll work.
How's that? Is it better?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Awesome. So I've got a bunch of little videos here lined up, And the lead-in to this whole subject that I want to bring up is, when did you come across the Bilderberg group? Because I've got videos here from like CNN. What is this? 9 years ago from CNN. Let's listen to this first 1 minute.
Buried lead. That's a story we do not think is getting enough play. When you think of secret societies, you think of groups of rich old men, like Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, sitting around a ridiculously long table, all trying to top each other with their best diabolical laugh. It makes for a fun cartoon, but in reality, such societies and secretive meetings do exist, and one is going...
Oh my God. CNN 9 years ago saying they do exist. Here's one from CNBC. This one takes the cake. Listen.
Forget the G7. If there's one party leaders want to be invited to, it's Bilderberg.
When did you find out about the Bilderberg? And what brought you to it? How should I say? Like, this is another video from the BBC from a long time ago. I'm just playing the video in the background.
That's from the BBC? Okay.
Yeah, if you can believe it, this level of production from 7 years ago is from the actual BBC.
Yeah, it has a 1990s editing vibe to it.
Basically, yeah.
Weird. It's like an old VHS tape. Yeah. No, for me, it was around 2004, I guess, when I was really going into my deep dive originally into 9/11 as my sort of shaking out of my my dream state. So I had a high intensity obsessive compulsion to try to figure that out, what the hell was going on. And so that was like an 8 month real hardcore manic deep dive that I was doing, and so I got hit early on by the Bilderberg group. Just researching this sort of thing, you can't avoid it. I think I don't know how long it was thereafter that Alex Jones did his little covert. Oh no, that was Bohemian Grove, eh? Yeah, I don't remember exactly how.
He went to the one in Switzerland. He went to the one in Switzerland with that older gentleman. Off the top of my head, I think his name was Jim Tucker. Let me. I have him somewhere here, like a page open. No, not this one. Maybe this one. Yeah, Jim Tucker. The Wikipedia page, believe it or not, that I got from the original Bilderberg page, and you go down to conspiracy theories and you follow along, and it mentions Alex Jones visiting them also, and it reminded me also of Daniel Estulin. He's also got a book about that, and this Jim Tucker guy was apparently from the 70s following them around.
Yeah, he was really in it, or he discovered it early on. So there's so many researchers who have treated this thing. So again, it's useful that there's been material pieced together. I think, like I said, that the 1971 period, it is a really important inflection point, because I mean, Prince Bernhard, who is he? What is he doing? So I mentioned that he's, part of the upper level aristocracy, one of the hereditary bloodlines, or one of the heirs to the hereditary bloodlines. I think he died in 2004. But he was also working very closely with people like Prince Philip Mountbatten, and Prince Philip Mountbatten, and he both co-founded an organization along with Sir Julian Huxley, the brother of Aldous, in 1961, called the World Wildlife Fund for Nature. That's also it's not a separate thing. Like, people try to sometimes deal with these as like two separate conspiracies or two separate phenomenon. They'll try to
Aldous Huxley sounds familiar. Remind me, who is that? Is that the Satanist, or am I jumping to conclusions?
I don't know if he was openly a Satanist. He certainly did satanic things as far as what he was a part of. He was a devout anti-Christian figure from the Huxley clan, the grandson of Thomas Huxley, brother of Julian. son of Leonard Huxley, another leading president of the Eugenics Society. And, you know, the Huxley clan are...
Eugenics. That's what it's from. Eugenics. That's how I know them. There you go. All right.
Yeah.
Moving right along. Yeah, eugenics is like old school for like just getting rid of depopulation. It's the old school term for those that might not be aware.
Yeah, and it's directly connected as well to the creation of the World Wildlife Fund for Nature in 1961, which was a fund that Prince Bernhard and Philip created in order to get revenue as a fund to provide money and resources to the earlier International Union for the Conservation of Nature, which Julian Huxley had founded in 1947 as a way to sort of change the paradigm of humanity, the entire ethical structure, from being the one that cherished the concept or presumed the existence of value in human life, and presumed the idea that freedom of the individual was sacred, to becoming one of only assuming that nature untouched by humans is sacred, and anytime you have economic activity which changes nature in any way, it must be stopped to preserve the sacredness of pure untouched Gaia, nature. So that whole value system was save nature from humans, and the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the World Wildlife Fund, and many other organizations that grew out of this hydra as a multifaceted beast over the ensuing decades, especially after the 1960s, is very much tied to the neo-eugenics movement of population control run by those who failed to achieve what they wanted to get done, as far as eugenics being a global new religion that was supposed to dominate the new world order of the 1940s, which was supposed to look, the world was supposed to look very differently. And when the world got to see what eugenics actually was, when it was fully embraced by a regime like Hitler, the world was rightfully, the people of the world were rightfully horrified, and their minds closed down to the possibility that this was a good direction to take. So they needed to sort of rebrand the package under new wineskins. So what Prince Bernhard is doing is part of that. He's also, you got to keep in mind that the idea of the world corporation that George Ball termed. He described in a couple of speeches, the need to integrate the House of Rothschild with the governments of Europe, which he saw as sort of needing to be integrated into something that would override sovereign nation states. And these were people who were working with the British and the Dutch families are two big zones of control of the empire. They were taking, the takeover of these regions was really consummated in the late 17th century. Or in the case of the Netherlands, it was really in 1609 that you had the creation of the Bank of the Bank of Amsterdam as the world's sort of first private central bank that worked very closely with the Dutch East India Company, a private corporation that would be of a supranational entity interfacing with the private banking structures, as far as creating a new type of design for empire that had not really ever existed before. And this itself grew out of a grouping of Italian-based royal families from Venice, called the Giovanni group of Venice, who were a bit of a breakaway, where Venice, was coming out of the Crusades, the most virulent period of Crusades that were begun in the late 11th century. And I think one of the biggest points of victory for Venice was the destruction of Constantinople after the Fourth Crusade, where Venice, which was formerly a junior partner of Constantinople, ended up utilizing some trickery, a lot of dirty tricks, in order to induce a bunch of Christians from the West to go and fight a crusade that never took them to the Holy Land, but rather took them on a detour to Constantinople to tear it down, loot Constantinople, destroy it in around 1401 or 1402, And thereby, right afterwards, Venice came out as the new hegemon. Instead of being the junior partner, they became the dominant force, having now control of Constantinople's former maritime and overland trade routes all across the Mediterranean, down through the east into Africa. This is where things like the Levant Company of Venice established itself a little bit later on. And Constantinople was finally totally really like razed a few decades later, when some Ottoman proxies were used and helped by Venice to just completely destroy the last remaining bastion or of resistance within Constantinople in 1450. So anyway, Venice's Levant Company was sort of the first, even before Amsterdam. It was the Levant Company of Venice as a banking, usurious lending operation that interfaced with Venice's global maritime trade routes, as well as, again, they had networks all the way down into the Mongolian horde territory. Venetian traders were the only traders of Europe that were given permission to move and act within Mongolian-controlled territories anywhere. No one else was, and they were also known for having the most integrated professional intelligence agency with their international embassies. Very, very rigorously managed system of control. So I think that they probably got the access to Mongolian territory by probably providing a lot of intelligence, and used the Mongols, it seems, as sort of the way the certain Anglo-American agents today would have liked and did use, and would have liked to continue to have used ISIS as a battering ram to destroy nations that were a little bit too reluctant to give up their sovereignty and submit to depopulation. So that was sort of the role of the Mongolians back in the day. Venice also had, a monopoly over global gold and bullion trades. It was a global center of banking that sort of had a fight at a certain point, because there was a bit of a crisis in the early 1500s when it became clear that a lot of the nations that were being manipulated by Venetian bankers stopped fighting each other for a little bit, called the League of Cambrai. And that was a big wake-up call for Venice, because the League of Cambrai was like everybody from the Holy Roman Empire, the French, the English, the Germans, everybody basically stopped killing each other, the Spanish, and said, well, wait a minute, why are we doing this, having these forever wars, when all sides are being funded by the same Venetian banking houses, and we're all being played against each other by the same Venetian advisors who are trying to get us to all kill each other, and they've been doing a pretty good job, so let's stop that, and let's declare war on Venice. And they did. And the League of Cambrai saw this coalition of powers wipe out the entire fleet of Venice in 1509, and Venice survived. They did some back-channel dealings, used a corrupt pope, sabotaged the League last minute, and all of a sudden the League went to war with France and Florence. And everybody was now friends with Venice, which is weird, except for France and Florence, which all of a sudden got annihilated. That was weird, but it was a wake-up call, and these families centered in Venice realized they're not as safe and secure as they thought they were, and needed to figure out a new strategy. So this is where one grouping called the Giovanni, the young Venetian movement, decided on focusing now on new geopolitical terrain in Amsterdam and Britain. At the time, the Netherlands and Britain were actually not empires yet. They were hotbeds of republicanism. Science, the arts were really vibrant in both of those regions. So that's where this parasite had to like go subvert, infiltrate, undo that goodness that was really blossoming. And you could just see it by the density of creative works of brilliance, of painting, of science that were emerging during the 16th century in both of those regions. It's quite astounding. So that had to be broken, corrupted from within, and that's where the Dutch East India Company and the Bank of Amsterdam got their start, modeled on the earlier Levant Company of Venice. That was, I think, set up in 1585, the Levant Company. And then later on, after a sufficient amount of control was created in Amsterdam, then there was what was known as the Glorious Revolution, the takeover of Britain, utilizing a Dutch puppet king, William of Orange, from the House of Orange that becomes, the family that Prince Bernhard is born into later, a few centuries later. And they install this puppet king into Britain, and with this puppet king, they clean house. A lot of the anti-imperialists get either killed, exiled, various things happen to them. Some of them stay behind and fight for about 2 decades. There's still some effort in Britain to try to push back against this, but the city of London becomes sort of the new center of finance, working very closely with the Dutch stock market and stockbrokers groups. The British East India Company had already been created, and they had already merged as with the Dutch East India Company in the early part of the 17th century. So they've created, that was the world's first big merger and acquisition as far as proto-corporatism is concerned. And they work closely with the new Bank of England. And the Bank of England was created in 1694, modeled on the Bank of Amsterdam as the world's sort of second or maybe third private central bank that, again, worked very closely with the new international East India companies that had extended themselves throughout India. They had prepared the groundwork for what would become the looting and destruction of China and of India under the pretense of free trade. You know, free trade being a tool of empire to say to nations, well, you thought you had the right to use protectionism or to protect yourself against the foreign dumping or manipulation of your currency or dumping of cheap goods, but you actually don't. See, free trade says that's against freedom, and we want everybody to be free, don't we? So you can't do that. You can't have a national bank because that's, again, infringing on the freedom of the marketplace to decide what the prices are. A national bank is disruptive, so you can't do that either. And that was sort of the language of empire to try to, and it worked pretty well, to keep their colonies underdeveloped. You know, every time there was an effort in the Americas by one of the British colonies to have the manufacturing of horseshoes or clothing or whatever, or the emission of paper script, like colonial script under Benjamin Franklin in the 1720s and 30s, that was quickly legalized, destroyed by the British Empire, like the center of command, because nobody was allowed to develop. That was the idea. Is as long as you keep everybody impoverished, developed, and dependent on a supranational entity, you can have best controls, right? And just for any time, at any moment where anyone gets ideas in their head that they have the right to control their destiny, you got to keep them fighting with their neighbor. So try to create an assassination, whisper in somebody's ear who's a bigoted, small-minded person, get them to like pick a fight that then just launches into a never-ending war. And that's the best way to keep the system in a state of constant controlled destabilization. So the current way to understand the Bilderberger group is you got to have that sort of organic sense of history as an organic process that's directly continuous, because all they wanted to do with Mussolini and Hitler was establish a world corporatist structure run by these private bankers. Sorry, I've got my video camera went fuzzy again, I noticed. Let me fix that. It's a weird little... Yeah. And that's what they've been trying to do after World War II. So again, the Henry Kissinger plays a key role, because 1971. So always going back to 1971. That was the year. What else happened? So not only did you have JFK murdered, his brother murdered in the 60s, along with Martin Luther King. You had Charles de Gaulle, an anti-globalist patriot who was overthrown in a foreign-directed color revolution in France. You know, all of a sudden these idiot young people who didn't know how the hell the world worked, who were like really high as a kite through the sexual revolution that did not spare the baby boomers of France, were all of a sudden out on the street protesting that Charles de Gaulle, the authoritarian, be overthrown.
I thought the revolution started in the 90s.
Actually, started with the French Revolution. The French Revolution was a color revolution. It wasn't a real revolution run by the British Foreign Office.
The more you know, huh?
The more you know. Yeah. So yeah, they've been obviously refining it. Yeah. But yeah, I know you don't believe what you just said, but yeah, that's a common thing people think. They actually think the color revolutions actually began in the 90s, and they don't realize this has just been empires have been doing this for centuries. This is not a new thing. You weaponize people who are economically distraught. They don't know how things are going, and you can easily herd them using a demagogue or two and just make them a battering ram against the very target nation that you want to destroy using these people as your weapons. That goes back. Probably we'll find traces of that going back to the days of the Roman Empire.
When you started talking about the Venetians and the banking, and I was like, where the hell is he going with this? Like, that's like way back in the past. We're talking about Bilderberg. But you did a very, very good summary. Like, I did a very good job of withholding any comments, and you did a very good job of summarizing the last 300-400 years of financial manipulation of the world. When you said that whole, what's it called? When you said... pre-merger. What did you say? It was like a pre-financial, the first proto-merger.
Merger and acquisition, private corporate merger and acquisition.
That gave me a clue as to where you're going, and then I let you continue. But like, that was a very good summary, and basically it all morphed into the city of London, one can say.
That's sort of the nerve center. The city of London is itself sort of this weird jurisdiction, a sort of nation unto itself. It's more than a nation. It's more. It is untouchable by the nations of England. It's a square mile inside of the city of London, called the city. Boris Johnson was its former Lord Mayor. It has its own police force, its own judiciary. It's protected by the Magna Carta. In fact, the Magna Carta was an oligarchist's charter that gave these oligarchs centered in London, in the city, absolute hegemonic rights to be above any law. And it really took the power away from any king forever that would ever choose to try to rein them in. He couldn't do it. So the Magna Carta is not necessarily what we've been taught. And it also enshrined the idea that the only free people are the land-owning oligarchs themselves and not, if you were a peasant or a serf, you were not a free man. You were not a free person. That's 99% of the people. So it's not really anything which protects liberty. All that to say, the City of London is a key control zone. The Inter-Alpha Group itself, when you look at these banks, the Lazare Frere connected banks, the Rothschild banks, the will later become Société Générale, Credenstalt Bank in Belgium, Banco Ambrosiano in Italy. These are all the Fondi banks. So if you want to look at how these old families maintain their continuity going back to the days of Venice, the Venetian structure all the way up through to the present, it's through the maintenance of these fondis, the family trusts, that then provide not only bloodline continuity, proprietary continuity as well, because you heard these upper level figures like Volpi de Miserata, who was the finance minister of Italy, a key handler of Mussolini, and a key figure who is closely aligned to a figure named Coudenhove Kalergi, the real godfather of what becomes the European Union. He himself is part of a high-level Venetian family. There's doges. The doge is sort of like the proto British king. And the doge is sort of the prima inter pares, but is himself managed by a committee of 3 and a secret committee of 10 and a committee of and a lower senate.
Can I say Dogecoin? Can I say Dogecoin here?
There might be some play on words there, maybe. There might be some play on words.
You think that's possible? Like
maybe it's a sick joke. It might be a sick joke. I don't know.
It sounds like it's possible. It wouldn't surprise me. To give you a break, to have some more of your tea, let's listen to from 2013 European Parliament.
Thank you. The next meeting of the Bilderberg Group is to be held in England. The location is thought to be the Grove Hotel, Watford, from the 6th to the 9th of June. These annual meetings are summits of the most wealthy, powerful and influential people in the worlds of politics, finance and business. The biggest mystery surrounding them is why the mainstream newspapers and broadcasters have chosen not to report on them since 1954.
Yes, we won't play the whole 1-minute clip, but the point is that This has been going around for a while and has been making the rounds more and more. So I'm wondering how much of our audience actually knew anything about the Bilderberg group before we brought it up. I'd like to hear in the comments. Everybody also like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget that if you're new here. Matt.
Mm-hmm. Do we have live activity right now, or this is going to be?
No. This is a recording.
Okay.
It's gonna be posted later. I'm not up to live interactions yet. We'll see how it goes. We'll see. First of all, if the tech can handle it, and then later if I'm up for actually taking people's opinions, because that can quickly escalate and get out of hand.
I had to turn off my comment
group
section on my Telegram channel. I tried an experiment for 1 week to see how having a comment section was going to work out. I had to shut it down. There was just so many bots and ignorant, Hitler was right. It's the Jews. All that shit. I was like, I can't deal with this. I got other things I got to deal with in my life.
No, before I even thought about becoming the working brother, I was active on Telegram since the beginning of the SMO, and I've been running a little channel, and I got so used to deleting and blocking and banning people who are just obnoxious that it's not a bother anymore. But I fully understand why people don't have a comment section.
Yeah.
So the Bilderbergers, they're important, but they're not that important. And one thing that we've heard is that they, how can I say, don't always tell us what they're doing. What do you think they're doing this year? Before we get into it in detail with the list and everything that we have planned for the second part of this little talk, what's your, considering everything that's going on in the world, what do you expect to be the topics?
It would be nice to be able to be a fly on the wall in some of these discussions. What they say they're going to talk about. I think they're going to talk about these topics. On their official website, I perused very quickly, and not surprisingly, the topic of China, topic of the Ukraine conflict, NATO, fiscal crisis, all of these things are going to be brought up. AI, the fourth industrial revolution.
So you went through it. You cheated. Okay, you went through it. You cheated. We'll just get into it in detail in the second one then. But yeah, the thing that I want to bring to people's attention is that the stuff that's publicly announced that it's going to be discussed is not. And like you say, to be a fly on the wall would be amazing. But the reason that I brought up the Jim Tucker guy earlier and that first visit of Alex Jones to the Bilderberg that you participated in watching, let's put it that way, he brought to light that this Jim Tucker guy would get these people who are at the hotels to talk to him about what was heard and what was said, like the staff at these hotels, because these high-level people are not very courteous to the staff, from what we hear. So it's not difficult to get the staff to rat on them after the conference passes. So I'm wondering if things might surface from people who are there on the ground asking people. We'll see what happens.
I don't know. I don't know. We'll have to wait. Yeah.
Do you have any plug you want to mention before we end this recording?
Yeah, sure. Right, because we're about to go into we're going to end this now, and then we'll do part 2 later on. Okay. If people want to look at some of the backdrop, the historical backdrop that I just summarized in such a loose slop. What I just did is such an overly simplistic brushstroke of history that if they want to really sink their teeth into this to get a better
summary.
I gave an executive summary, which is not sufficient to say that if you walk away from this with the opinions that I just threw out there as your own, you won't have knowledge. They'll just be opinions floating there. But if you want to sink those roots deeper into the mind as real knowledge, that's earned, I would suggest. My book series goes through a lot of this, especially volume 4. of the Anglo-Venetian roots of the deep state, volume 4 of the Clash of the Two Americas series of books. It's about 500 pages. A lot of this material on how the Roman oligarchy reorganized themselves, transplanted like a parasite their operations into the Venetian lagoons. With the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, reconstructed their operation with a little branch in the Vatican. And then did all of that over again with the same objective to create, basically a world government of feudalism that was not attained by the Roman Empire. And when that didn't work, they moved to Britain, or to the Netherlands, then to Britain, and then built up their fifth colonists in the United States as well. So if people want to know that, yeah, the books are available on CanadianPatriot.org, all 4 volumes, including the Untold History of Canada series. That'll be a good start. If you do that, you'll probably speak with something pretty close to real knowledge, I would say.
Well said. Well said. I have nothing to add. Thank you for coming on. I'm gonna roll us out with some music. Everyone, thank you for sticking by. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. See you soon.